When Apple releases a product lineup, each product in the lineup has a distinct target audience and a purpose. The higher priced device is objectively better than the lower priced product. And the pricing is also intelligently decided just to nudge people to go to the higher slab of the product. Take the iPhone lineup. Currently we have iPhone SE, iPhone 13 mini, iPhone 13, iPhone 13 Pro and iPhone 13 Pro Max. Each device more expensive than the previous one. But also it is very distinct. The more expensive iPhone has more GPU cores, better screen, better camera, premium build, etc. So an easy choice. Pay more and get a better device. Same is the case with the iPad lineup, AirPods and Apple Watch 2. You know, the MacBooks had the same story too up until M2 MacBook Air came out recently. Let's understand this properly because it's important and gonna majorly affect your buying decision. Before the M2 MacBooks came out, this was the Mac lineup. The M1 MacBook Air was an incredible device raved by many and was an easy recommendation for most people. For folks who needed some extra performance boost and M1 Pro was an overkill, the M1 MacBook Pro was an excellent choice because it had active cooling, which means there would be better sustained performance for video editing, photo editing, content creation, etc. I use a Mac Mini with M1 for my video editing needs, and it simply shows you don't need an M1 Pro or M1 Max for even heavy workloads. For those needs, the M1 13-inch MacBook Pro was perfect. You pay extra money, you get more for it. And then came the M2 MacBook Air with a refreshed design. This is how MacBook lineup look like now. M1 MacBook Air is still in the lineup. The new MacBook Air is now more expensive, starting at $1199, and the 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro becomes an oddball. It's a whole new mess. It's an awesome design, by the way. New colors, improved 1080p camera, 4-speaker system, larger display, and an amazing battery life. But in my opinion, Apple made 3 big mistakes. 1. They kept the old M1 MacBook Air in the lineup. 2. They increased the price of M2 MacBook Air, now starting at $1199 instead of $999. And 3. Not refreshing the 13-inch MacBook Pro enough. So with this, there is a huge gray area in the entry-level segment of MacBooks. Now, the lineup is not linear to just pay more to get a better device. You have to decide between features which matter to you more and live with not having other features. Let me explain. Let's take M2 MacBook Air and M2 13-inch MacBook Pro. The Air starts at $1199 while the Pro starts at $1299. What's immediately not noticeable is that for $1199, you're getting 8-core CPU and 8-core GPU, while you're getting an 8-core CPU and 10-core GPU with the 13-inch Pro model, which means if you bump up the Air to a 10-core GPU, the price is now $1299, which is exactly the same as 13-inch MacBook Pro. Now that both the models are priced same, Apple had to cut some features in each model to differentiate them. So Apple gave a refreshed design for Air, stuck with outdated design for the Pro, gave a better 10-bit Liquid Retina larger display with notch for the Air, while retaining the 8-bit 13.3-inch display for the Pro. Gave a 1080p webcam for the Air, while keeping the really old 720p webcam for the Pro. Gave a 4-speaker sound system for the Air and the same 2-speaker system for the Pro. Wait. A better and larger display, newer design, better camera, better speaker, yet the same or even a lower price for the 8-core GPU model? That doesn't make sense. So why is the 13-inch a Pro model? Where the Pro has an advantage over the Air is that it has active cooling system, meaning it can handle better sustained performance than the Air. The M2 MacBook Air doesn't have CPU fans to cool the system. So when it gets hot, the CPU will simply slow down and you will see reduced performance. Tests show that intense workload will throttle the Air within minutes. The Pro, which has active cooling, can sustain M2 performance for a while. The Pro also has a slightly larger battery, 20 hours versus 18 hours of the Air. Though it's a 2-speaker system, the speakers have a higher dynamic range and the microphones on the 13-inch Pro are better with higher signal to noise ratio and directional beamforming. You see where Apple messed up here? Now you have to choose between sustained performance versus better display, better battery life versus latest design, better camera versus better microphones, better speaker versus louder speakers. You have to pick one over the other. You cannot get both even if you're willing to pay more. To add to the mix, there is another big issue. Both the 256GB models of MacBook Air and 13-inch MacBook Pro have a much slower single NAND SSD, while the larger storage models come with faster double NAND SSDs, which means the 512GB SSDs are almost twice as fast as the 256GB SSD models. With just 8GB RAM, the OS will use these SSDs for memory swap, which means with 256GB model, the system will become quite slow even if you're not using the full power of M2 chips. So you should at least pick the 512GB version for both models, bringing the cost to $1499 for both models. What Apple should have ideally done was bring the same refreshment of MacBook Air to 13-inch MacBook Pro as well and give us a good reason to upgrade. But So what would I recommend as an entry-level MacBook? I would still very gladly recommend the $999 M1 MacBook Air. With the workloads you expect out of a MacBook Air, the M1 will perform and even exceed your expectations for the next few years. If you need more performance, I highly recommend to skip both M2 MacBook Air and 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro and go for the 14-inch M1 Pro MacBook Pro, because you will have to spend at least $1699 for a 512GB SSD and 10-core GPU and 16GB RAM. The 14-inch Pro starts at $1999 with the M1 Pro chip with much better performance. If you can stretch, there is real value in the 14-inch Pro. If you definitely cannot stretch your budget, then ask yourself which feature of the M2 MacBook Air and M2 13-inch MacBook Pro matters to you more and make a decision. I don't think one is better over the other objectively for the price and serves a different set of people. Okay, that's it for this video. A like and subscribe to the channel would be amazing. Thanks for supporting. See you in the next one. This is Anjana. Bye-bye.